Hey guys, everybody is automatically muted, just so you know, because this is running as a webinar. So you'll be able to hear me, but I won't be able to hear you. There should be a chat feature though. If you need anything from me, you should be able to just click on the chat function and we'd be good to go. Hello, Lori. I am excited for you being in the training today. We're going to make sure it's a great training for you. Got a couple more that just joined us. I know I'm saying this a lot for those of you who got on here early, but the audio is one way because it's done as a webinar. So we will be recording this and then you'll have access to a recording. We'll send that back out at the first part of this next week and we'll integrate some slides in with the recording. So it makes it a little easier for you to follow along and gives you some notes to go with things. All right, it is 4 o'clock, so we are going to get started on this. We've got a lot of great content that we're going to cover today. So I want to make sure that you guys do take some notes. What's interesting about when you're learning things, if you listen to something, you typically only retain between 10 and 20% of it if you're just listening, particularly if you are passively listening. So if you are doing something else at the same time that you're doing this. So I would encourage you, take notes if you can. Now, if you're driving and listening, please don't take notes because we don't want you to crash. But if you take notes, you increase the likelihood of retaining the information to over 50%. If you'll take notes while you're listening and then go do something with the information, then you can increase your odds of retention to over 80%. So my goal is for you to get as much out of this as you can possibly get. As we go through this, when we think about mastering the art and the science of leadership, leadership is more than just getting other people to do the things that you want them to do, but it is based in influence. When you think about all of the different things that you deal with as a leader, your job primarily is to get other people to be able to perform at their job more effectively. So my job isn't just about being successful. 85% of the things that I do in business now as a leader are getting other people to succeed. To start that, you have to start by learning how you lead your thoughts. Your thoughts themselves, or your mindset that you have, has three primary components that you deal with. The first is the state that you operate within. When you think about the emotions that you have, and I'm going to demonstrate a little bit of this, all of your negative emotions turn inward. So if you look at your physical posture and the way that you carry yourself as a leader, you create confidence in other people by being confident yourself. You create that ability for them to believe in their own capability if you look like you know what you're doing. So opening up your posture, pulling your shoulders back, chin up as you're interacting with people, it changes the way that people look at you as a leader. The perspective shift that you're trying to create is your physical presence or your physiology actually controls your emotional state. The emotions that you have inside of you, you can make them into anything that you want them to be. Given the difference, if you're going to hire somebody, one of them being really positive and in a good mood on a regular basis with a great skill set, and one of them being really negative with a great skill set, you always choose the positive one. The research that Andy Andrews has done on this through his organization, he's identified that anytime we interact with people, controlling our mental attitude is one of the 7 decisions of success that we have to make on a daily basis. So learning to control that is my state that I will be in. I will control my physical presence, and as a leader, I will carry myself in a way that it makes it easier for other people to be confident. That means the mirror neurons that are in the prefrontal cortex of your employees and of you, when they see you happy and confident, then they start to believe that they should be happy and confident as well. It's that variation from, I'm angry and it's a Monday or whatever day of the week it is, to we've got this. There's nobody I'd rather do this with. So you're setting the tone for your people to learn to believe in themselves. The second piece of your mindset is the story that you tell yourself. I am, and then fill in the blank, will determine what you believe about you moving forward and what you start to notice about the people around you. That I am statement, it keeps you focused on the things that actually matter. So I want you to think about this. When you first wake up in the morning, you set the tone of what you're going to look for with these 2 steps. You set your state of mind or your emotional state. Then you set the tone of what you want to notice by saying the story of me today will be and whatever the story is going to be, and you start moving in that direction. And then finally, you have strategy. As leaders, if we can't understand and embrace the idea that our job is first to create the right emotional states in people, then to create the right story of success with us as a team together, they will never follow the strategy. The strategy doesn't come first. The strategy actually comes last. Now, if you were to create this wheel, think about you right in the center. And then all around you are the 5 most important relationships that you have for your success. I want you to think about the way that you interact with those relationships, both coming in, like how they impact you, and going out, how you impact them. Every single day, you have to consider, how can I make these 5 relationships more solid? I think about my own relationships with my spouse, who has a great impact on me at work and at home. The relationships I have with my business manager, with my marketing director, with each aspect of what you do in your business. If you focus on building the potential of the other person, and you focus on making sure that you receive the right things from that person, then you're setting your mind in the right direction. You can either have an inward mindset or an outward mindset. The inward mindset says it is all about me and I have to be taken care of first. I want to make sure that everybody looks out for what's best for me. The outward mindset says that I'm looking at how everything that I do impacts those key relationships around me. If you're considering that those 5 most important relationships that you have are always going to impact you, then I want you to think, what would you do differently if you knew that the next thing you said to those 5 people was going to determine whether or not you could succeed for the next 30 days? The outward mindset is always evaluating what's going to be good for others and then looking for what's good for the self. But it starts with outward, not with inward. Think about those relationships and think about the perception that they have of you when they're looking from the outside in. When you want a specific perception to be had of you as a great leader, as always having it together, as the kind of person who knows exactly what they're supposed to do and when they're supposed to do it, then what you do is you say, if my characteristics of who I want to be known as are great leader, ethical, always driven, caring, whatever the characteristics are, you then reverse engineer and say, what behaviors make that unmistakable? So often we forget that we are always being evaluated based on behaviors, not based on the characteristics that we see in ourselves. Think about those characteristics and then think about how you reverse engineer the behaviors. It's great for the conversations that you have with people as well, because when you're talking to a person, they say, I'm such a hard worker. Then you have to ask the question, well, what behaviors would make that unmistakable in the minds of everyone around you? How would they know absolutely that you're a hard worker, or that you're driven, or that you're organized, or whatever the characteristic is that you have indicated defines you as a person? The second component of leadership mastery is learning to be a person of influence. Influence is kind of an interesting thing because the definition of influence is the measure of your influence is the measure of your ability to have an impact on the character, the development, and the behaviors of another person or a group of people. So if we consider that we believe we are leaders, and then we look at whether or not we're actually having a positive impact on another person, that determines whether we're a positive leader or not. There are lots of people that are having a tremendous impact on others, but the impact isn't always positive. The impact has to be measured by, am I taking those key relationships, those 5 most important that we talked about, and am I improving them? Robert Cialdini wrote a book called called Influence, and he came up with the 6 laws of influence that we have to consider. If we realize that leadership is influence, then mastering influence determines whether or not other people desire to follow us in all that we're doing. If they have no desire to follow us, then guess what? We don't actually have influence. John Maxwell said it in his book, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. If you believe that you're a leader and you turn around and you see that no one is following, you're just out taking a walk. you're not actually leading. So here are the laws of influence according to Dr. Robert Cialdini. The first is the law of reciprocity. This means that if we go first, if we do something that is positive and creates an impact for our employees, then they have a desire, it's kind of born in the way that our subconscious works, to do something back. But we go first. The leader always has to go first in order to get that reciprocation. His second law is the law of consistency. The human mind and the four needs of the conscious mind, the first and most important need of the conscious mind is the need for consistency. We will go out of our way to keep things going in the right direction, just like they always have. And if they're in the wrong direction, we will still try to preserve normalcy. We go out of our way to keep things with what we know. That's why if someone is in a bad relationship, they tend to stay in the bad relationship because at least they know what they're supposed to expect in the relationship. From the perspective of influence, if you can get a small yes, any kind of getting people committed to go in a certain direction, then it makes it a whole lot easier for the next time you ask to get a bigger yes. One of the research projects that he did in demonstrating this was that when he looked at people and asked them, said, hey, would it be okay if we put this giant yard sign in your yard that says you are against drunk driving? There are very few people in this world that are for drunk driving, so that should have been a really easy one. But the vast majority of people said, no, I'm against drunk driving, but I don't want the giant yard sign in my yard. So what they did instead is said, now let's try it in a different way. And they called 200 people and they said, we'd like to send you a small sticker. It's 2 inches by 2 inches. Would you be willing to put this in your front window saying that you're against drunk driving? They had over 90% of the people say yes. And then when they called back and said, can we put this yard sign in your yard? Same giant yard sign. They called the same people that had already said a small yes. Over 80% of them said, yes, you can put the large yard sign in our yard. Consistency is what we strive for. So if we've already said yes to a person and committed to follow a specific leader, then we have a tendency to want to keep following that leader. That's consistency. The third is the law of social validation. Companies like Glassdoor initially made their presence known based on social validation. Glassdoor.com was a website that people could go to and say, I would like to rate my employer and tell you how good they are or how bad they are and what my experience of working for them has been like. When they did that, if it was positive, they created positive social proof or social validation that this was a great company to work for. When a person went to Glassdoor and said, man, these people are horrible, I would never want to work for them, they created social validation in the other direction. Think about the number of times that you've seen on social media, ISO, or in search of a great plumber, a great construction person, whatever it is that people are looking for. We have a tendency to care more about what our friends think about things than what the marketing people think about things. So that law of influence, if you as a leader have a lot of people that love working for you and they post about it on social media or they just talk about how lucky they feel to work for you, you've created the social proof that other people would enjoy that same experience. His fourth law was the law of liking. The law of liking says that we have a tendency to follow or be influenced by people that we like, know, and trust. That means that you have to have a pleasing personality. Napoleon Hill, in his book Think and Grow Rich, listed having a pleasing personality as one of the 13 principles of success in any industry. So create that pleasing personality, but that doesn't mean that you're a pushover. That means that you set really high standards and people feel good about themselves when they work for you. The fifth is the law of authority. Law of authority says that you have developed expertise in a given area. When I was a sophomore in college, I remember asking an English teacher, I would really like to know how many books do I have to read in order to be considered an expert at something? And her response was, you have to read 100 books on a given subject in order to be considered an expert in that subject. I went, good grief, that is a lot of books to read. I've heard people say anything from 3 books on a subject to 1,000 books on a subject. So I set out on this journey when I went into business to read at least 100 books on leadership. I wanted to be the leadership guy, so I wanted to be an expert. Your authority isn't in being able to prove other people wrong. That's arrogance. Your authority comes from wanting the best from others and knowing your materials. When you go out of your way to learn the information and to master what comes in front of you, you'll find that people will give you authority. And there are different types of authority that you can get. The only one that matters in leadership, though, is relationship-based authority. We like, know, and trust, therefore believe in this person, as do other people. They're consistent as a leader, and they've gone before us. And then the final law of influence, the law of scarcity. This one is used a lot when we're trying to get around people that we consider to be top influencers. I made an observation, I think this was about 2003, maybe 2004, that the busier I got in business, the more people wanted to do business with me. You're more desirable when there is less of you. Consider that for just a second. I think about the fact that, and I'm going to talk about my wife just a little bit here, but I was much more smitten with her than she was with me when we first started dating. Therefore, I was pushing much harder to be around her than she was pushing to be around me. As she loves me and we are happily married, 26 years into marriage, thank you. But the scarcity of, I'm good with you, I'm good without you, actually stimulated that desire to be with her even more. When a leader is comfortable in their own skin and they don't need people to like them all the time, you find that lack of need creates that scarcity where you say, I want to be around this person, I want to learn from them, and I want to grow with them. When you're creating your leadership culture, you take into account what it means to be an influencer, what those different laws of influence are according to Cialdini, and you start thinking, who are we as an organization? The alignment means that you get leaders who are in alignment with the values that you have espoused are most important. And then you take those leaders and they create a workflow down. The alignment of values has to start with what your purpose is. And I'm going to give you a very simple formula here for how you create a purpose statement. I am here to blank so that blank. So I am here to build great cultures so that employees want to work for an organization, want to work hard, and want to give their best. You can create your statement however you want to, but I found that this simple formula makes it easy for people to understand and easy for them to get in alignment with you and your organization. The long mission statements, we are here to be the market leader in this and that, and to scratch our head twice and do all these kinds of other things, that entire paragraph, nobody remembers it. Every time I work with an organization, when we're trying to build their alignment, what their purpose is and what their vision is for where they're going, I ask the question, what is your mission statement? Can you recite it? Very seldom can an organization recite their mission statement. And I mean from the CEO down. That alignment is critical. It has to be something that is so easy to understand and so easy for people to embrace that they go, I'm in. I am all in on this. I can't wait. The second piece of getting your leadership culture in alignment so that you have influence is creating the right workflow. This means that you're engineering the processes to make success predictable. If you can't make it predictable and you say things like, just do your best work, I don't know what that is. I need to know what your specific expectations are. And we'll talk about those in the accountability section today. But the workflow has to be, if you do this, then this, then this, then this, you'll always get the same outcome. That's the strategy piece from the mindset, state, story, strategy that allows us to take the alignment of values, create measurables, and then make sure that people stay on track. Then the part that I find that a lot of people skip out on, and because it's tough, is feedback. It is so tough for us to go be honest with other people and say, I need to let you know what I like about what you're doing, but I also need to let you know what I don't like about what you're doing. When you confront another person about something negative, there's three pieces to it. And this is how you manage performance. When you did, describe the behavior. I felt, describe your feeling. because of this outcome. So it's behavior, and then it's feeling, and then it's outcome or impact. If you look at those three pieces, when you confront a person, it makes it not about them. It makes it about the behavior and the outcome, and then you own your own feelings. The feedback process requires you to give honest and direct feedback and then listen to other people. That leads us into how you communicate effectively. Communication is the cornerstone for either your success or your failure in everything that you do. Harvard says that 85% of all the problems that exist in business today are based on poor communication or miscommunication. That means we've got to master 4 specific pieces of being a great communicator. Piece 1, how do you read other people? I've been teaching courses now for, I think, since 2014, so about 6 years, on how to read faces. There's 5 components of the face that you read. How a person makes decisions is up on their forehead. How they project themselves into the world is based on the eyes and the eyebrow area. Anything that they worry about or insecure about is in the nose and upper lip area. The way they evaluate themselves is in their chin. And the ears tell us how they process the world. If I know as a leader how to read the people that are working for me, then I know how to adapt my leadership style to make sure that I'm giving them what they need. That's the piece that allows me to engage. When I am engaging with another person, what I'm doing is saying, I like you, know you, trust you, and I believe in you. But they're also giving me that same thing back. It's a reciprocation between that. I go first as the leader. Now, this is a change for generations. If you think back to the traditionalist generation, those born 1945 or before, with that generation, sometimes known as a silent generation, they didn't engage as the leader first. The employee had to earn the respect of the boss, and then the boss would give some respect back to the employee. With Gen Xers, millennials, and Generation Z, which is now 85% of the total workforce, boomers only make up 15%. That means we are switching to, we as leaders go first. We earn the respect of the employee, and then the employee reciprocates respect. That allows us to access one of the most critical parts of who a person is, and that is their subconscious programming. Think of the mind in 2 parts, your subconscious mind and your conscious mind. The subconscious is where all of the beliefs of that individual are. What you believe will always determine what you think about and notice. What you think about and notice will determine what you do or the actions that you take, and those actions will determine the results. As we are engaging with another person, if we have read them effectively and we've engaged with them, they're now going to open up to us and say, here are my limiting beliefs and here are my empowering beliefs. When it's okay to just be them, they open up. Here's the big kicker, though. So often as leaders, we work so hard to make other people fit to us instead of us fit to other people that it doesn't make it a safe place for people to open up and be honest about who they are and what's going on with them at that time. If you accept people fully for exactly who they are with no need to change, the paradox of that is they're automatically willing to change. Then you can pull them in the direction that you want them to go. You can't lead and pull in communication until you've accessed that subconscious mind and what those beliefs are. In neurolinguistic programming, when we talk about pacing another person and then pulling or leading the other person. To pace another person, you become more like that person. And then you pull them by trying to do something and see if they mimic a movement that you've done. Salespeople do it all the time when they're trying to engage with people at a deeper level. The times that you do the very best with your people are the times that you listen most effectively. I took a class my senior year in college, this is back in 1994, called Active Listening. Within Active Listening, this 16-week course, I'm going to try to just compress this down into 4 steps. There were 4 key components of being a great listener. The first is get rid of distractions and focus on the other person. The second piece of being a great listener is to respond non-verbally. What is amazing about when you're interacting with people, as the listener, if you interact nonverbally at a much stronger level, you can notice how much it influences the way they engage with you. So I want you to try this evening when you're around your family or your friends. Just when you're listening to somebody, get really intent, like really look closely at them and narrow that brow and go, wow, yes, and exaggerate some of your nonverbals and just see what happens. What I have found consistently is the more engaged nonverbally I am, the more engaged that speaker is with me. The third piece of being a great listener is to ask great questions. This is where you have to be fully paying attention. So when somebody is saying something, you go, so tell me more about that. Or I don't understand where you're coming from there. Can you expand? Questions allow people to expand on what's going on and give you something more. And then the fourth piece is reflection. This is where you feed back what you heard, but you put it in your own words. When you put things into your own wording, it allows people to say, yes, that's right, or no, that's not. So let's say, for example, I go home and my wife is talking about something that happened during the day and she seems pretty upset about it. The way that I might reflect that is, that must have been really stressful, or it sounds like you're really angry about that. I'm trying to understand the underlying emotional intent of the message. And she can either say, yeah, it was really stressful, or she might say, not really stressful. It was more confusing. She's then had the chance to clarify. I go back to step 3, questioning, confusing. What do you mean by that? And she can explain it. And the whole time I'm using nonverbals and I'm staying focused on her. That's the 4 steps. Focus on the other person, respond nonverbally, ask great questions, and reflect back what you heard, but put it in your own words. The next piece of leadership mastery is learning how you lead with clarity. The first time I heard this, I think it was 2004. I was talking with a group of leaders from an organization that I've been working with, and one of them just made the offhand comment, I'm so tired of my boss being so certain and yet unclear. And I thought, man, I bet a lot of us are tired of that. We want to lead with clarity, not certainty. When you're certain, you don't listen. We just talked about the 4 steps of listening. You got to master those so that you can learn to be clear in your messaging. When we are creating the right culture and the right atmosphere for our people, we lead with a plan. And plan is an acronym. P is place the bar high. We don't need people lowering standards. In fact, the American Psychological Association has been able to demonstrate conclusively that the only way we build positive esteem in the people that work for us is to have high standards for what they do and then recognize when they achieve those standards. It's not setting the standards low and making it easy. It's setting them high and then finding ways to praise them as they get there and when they get there. People will always live into the expectations that you set for them. The expectancy model theory from the 1960s in psychology described how our minds respond when we believe somebody believes something about us. Think about this. I'm a preacher's kid. What is it that people think about preacher's kids? And don't answer out loud because I can't hear you. But just what do people think about preacher's kids? Oh, I know they're rebellious and they're awful and they're horrible teenagers. What you find is if you set the bar that low, then people start living into that standard. But if you set the bar high, oh my gosh, preacher's kids are amazing. They always live by such higher standards and they're so giving and loving and they never cause problems. There's a pretty good chance my experience of the teenage years might have been different had somebody set the bar high instead of low. The L in plan is live by example. You have to invest in your own development and you have to perform at a top level. When I talk to managers that are frustrated by people not showing up on time for work, the first question I ask is, what time do you get there? And they go, well, I work on salary, so it doesn't really matter. I go, it doesn't matter for the pay, but what matters is the example that you're giving. As a leader, you have to go first on everything. You lead by example by being positive, by being engaging, by setting your own standards for yourself really high. The A in plan is acknowledge wins. When you affirm a person, it is the same manner or the same 3 steps as if you were confronting a person. The affirmation piece or acknowledgement is when you did this behavior, I felt this because impact, behavior, feeling, impact. That reinforces that behavior and ensures that you get more. And then the N in plan for leading with clarity is nip it in the bud when there's a problem. The moment you know there's conflict or a problem, you have to deal with it right then. If you put it off or avoid it, you'll find that the problem simply expands. When you are learning to lead effectively, you start by leading yourself. Then you go into knowing what your strengths are, and you have to also know what your weaknesses are. Then you learn to have an outward focus so that you're looking at the good of others and how every decision that you make is going to impact the people around you, while building your influence so that you're not pushing people, but you are pulling them in the right direction. Then you focus on the components of how you build a culture. And then you realize if we are clear as leaders, we are driven by mission before money. Here's another paradox of being a great leader. Mission equals money, but money doesn't equal mission. The order of your focus matters intensely. Simon Sinek, in almost every talk that he's given, talks about how so many leaders say, I know my people are important. See, it is profits, and then it is making sure that we're doing market expansion, and then it's taking care of our people. But people are third, they're not first. Your mission of what you hope to accomplish through your people has to come before the P&L statement. The funny thing is, the moment I switched that in my own business, I started making a whole lot more money. The same thing is true for every organization that I've worked with. When I can get the CEO and the C-suite to realize mission comes first, then all of a sudden their profitability goes through the roof. Jim Collins said there is as much as a 20-to-1 difference when you put mission before everything else. $20 to every $1 in net profit increase. That's pretty amazing, and it's pretty worthwhile as well. The next component of leading yourself effectively and leadership mastery is creating your own style. There's 4 basic leadership approaches. You can be an autocrat, a bureaucrat, a democrat, or laissez-faire. And this has nothing to do with political parties, just so you know. The autocrat doesn't believe that people want to work. The autocrat believes that you've got to push and you've got to always be there. They go by the saying, while the cat's away, the mice will play. The bureaucrat manages through process. They create rules and systems for everything that they do. The bureaucrat doesn't believe that people are driven by relationship. The bureaucrat believes that people will do what is required of them, and that has to stay the focus. The democratic leader believes in listening to their people, but maintaining the final say. So a little less driven by rules, a little bit more driven by relationships. So as you can see, this is going kind of along this continuum. The democratic leader understands that they hold the ultimate responsibility for the success or failure of their organization. But they also know that if they don't listen to their people, things aren't going to work well. And then the laissez-faire leader says, I'm going to create a culture, I'm going to give my people the tools and the resources, and I'm going to stay out of the way. I've worked for all 4 of these. My favorite boss was a laissez-faire leader. They said on January 1, hey, let's meet once a month. I'll give you everything that you need to be successful. But ultimately, it's up to you. I'm not going to be there watching you, and I'm not going to check when you check into work and when you leave. That's the reason that I chose that style within my own business, is because it's what I responded to. But I had to go hire people that responded to that style of leadership. I have had employees that needed me to be a little more democrat. Some of them even needed me to be more of an autocrat. You as a leader have to gauge the situation and adapt to the person. So the archetypes that you will play, and you will most likely play all of these at some point. The first is the charismatic leader. The charismatic leader is exciting and moves around a lot and jumps and they give great speeches and they really rouse the emotions of other people and they get them moving in the right direction. The participative leader says, I'm going to work side by side with you. I would never ask you to do anything I wouldn't do. The situational leader says, I'm going to look at each person and each situation, and I'm going to adapt who I need to be based on who they need me to be. The transactional leader says, I will give you this if you will give me that. This is more of the Tayloristic style of leadership, the carrot and the stick, so to speak. The transformational leader says, I will pour into people, I will love on people, and I will give them everything I can so that they go create something amazing and they bring it back. And then finally, the servant leader. The servant leader flips that organizational structure upside down and says, my primary job is to make the person that reports to me, and multiple of them typically, very successful. It can't be about, I have to be successful. It has to be, how do I help other people become more successful? So it's going the opposite direction of traditional leadership. Next, we get into strategy. The old question that we would ask related to strategy is, how do you eat an elephant? The person who is mastering leadership is mastering not just the 5-year plan. The person who is mastering leadership is mastering the daily plan. So how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. We have to consider the way that we process the world around us. Most people don't think 5, 10, and 20 years out. That doesn't mean that you don't need a plan for your business that far out, but what it does mean is that you have to think the way that your people think, and you have to understand that markets shift. Right now, as we're doing this, the COVID-19 virus is scaring people to death. The media is really excited about it. They're telling everybody to stay home, don't go on flights, avoid human contact, all kinds of stuff. That's a shift in the market or a crisis in the market. To be a contingent thinker, when a market shifts the way that it has in the last couple of weeks, you start going, based on where we're at, how do we adapt so that we don't compromise our 1, 3, 5, and 10-year plans, but we adapt our process of getting there? You're learning to map your scenarios out. If this happens, we will do this. If this happens, we will do this other thing. And so you're always looking at your contingent thought. When you are thinking through things, you start with divergent thinking. I want as many ideas as I can get, and then you come into convergent thinking. So when a crisis happens, you go, let's look at all the possibilities of what we could do, and then let's narrow it down the best that we can so that we come up with the 1, 2, or 3 ideas that are going to give us the very best result. That divergent to convergent thinking process is how you think strategically. When you're leading other people, I believe that your primary job is to teach thought. So few people have learned to really think for themselves. Most people are freaked out by the idea of being responsible for thinking for themselves. The biggest question you have to ask is, how do I help people think in such a way that they understand that the activities of today determine the results of the day, the week, the month, the quarter, the year, the 3 years, the 5 years? When we can get that kind of thought going in people's heads, then it makes it so much easier to move into our final piece of this, which is positive accountability. The word accountability, in my mind, has gotten kind of a bad rap. When you think about creating accountability with the people around you, it is not about forcing them to do what they're supposed to do. In fact, there is a magic formula for accountability. I talked about acknowledging or affirming the good things that people have done, and I talked about confronting earlier. That model is a 70-30 model for creating accountability. 70% of your accountability has to be positive. When you did this, I felt great because of this positive outcome. And 30% can be negative, confronting another person. When you confront all the time, but you don't affirm, you create a negative culture and a culture of fear. When people start being afraid of you as a leader, you don't really have accountability, you have nervousness. And nervousness does not produce success. The research that Sean Aker did on the happiness advantage demonstrated that when a person is happy or in a good mood, their brain functions 30% better and they perform at least 30% better in the workplace. The reason we create positive accountability is we want that better performance and that better functioning employee. You can create, from Gallup's perspective, as much as a 300% difference in performance output by using the right accountability structures. So the 3 pieces, as we are teaching people to start leading themselves and be more accountable, the first is set clear expectations. There's 3 components in setting an expectation. What do you want? When do you want it by? And how will you measure it? You have to be very clear on all 3 of those. I want you to do a great job as soon as possible, and I'll know if you did a bad one. That's wrong. I need this report by Thursday at 2 p.m. You'll know that you did it right because it'll have these 5 components in the report. What do you want? When do you want it? How will you measure? The second piece of this is create right processes. That's that workflow component, but it's also the process of when a person makes a mistake, you have 3 questions that you have to ask to help them recover from the mistake. This process of mistake recovery, it creates ownership or internal accountability. The biggest distinguishing factor, according to William James, who is a father of American psychology, for when a person is successful or unsuccessful is what's called the locus of control. Locus just means location. So the location of control of either I made a decision or it's not my fault. The devil made me do it. 3 questions create internal control. First is, can you walk me through what happened that led to us getting the result we have instead of the result that we wanted? And then you listen. You have to use those 4 steps of listening. Then you come back with the second question. At what point in that process could you have done something different that would have gotten us what we wanted instead of what we got? And then you listen again. When they identify a point of explanation, they have identified internal ownership. Third and final question, what will you do next time to ensure that we get the right results moving forward? When they answer that, they're saying, next time I will. So the third component of the right leadership, self-leadership and expectations is right behaviors. By asking those mistake questions, can you walk me through what happened? At what point could you have done it different? And what will you do next time? You're creating a model for them to own what they did without having to feel horrible so that they can create a plan for what they're going to do moving forward. Your job now is to pay attention. Observe the behaviors, and 70% of the time, look for the good things that you can affirm, and 30% of the time, look for the things that you can correct. When you observe behaviors, you have to stay tuned in. That's what one of my early mentors called management by walking around, or MBWA. When we are creating success or effectiveness in work, we have to start by creating an awareness of what we want. That was setting the expectations, and an awareness of what we don't want, making sure people are aware of what the good and the bad of being successful in their specific position are. Second, we have to develop the ability in people. Training should never end. As a leader, you will continuously strive to learn how to be a better leader. I have read over 500 books on leadership now. I got to 100 as fast as I could to be an expert. I've now exceeded 500 books on leadership since I went into business just over 20 years ago. My ability has to continue to grow, because if I put a lid on where I'm at and go, well, I know everything I need to know, then I stop growing and I have less to offer. I can't give what I don't have. The third piece of people being effective is we have to then ask for commitment. Once they're aware and we develop their ability, now we can ask, will you commit to this specific outcome that I need by this date with this result? That was that expectation piece. The commitment should come easy if they believe in you as a leader. If they don't believe in you as a leader, it's going to be really, really tough to keep them going in the right direction. So creating this accountability and teaching people how to lead effectively, it's not really rocket science. It's really just understanding, how do I create an alignment of values? How do I create the right workflow for the things that I need to do? And then how do I have the right feedback processes so that my culture moves forward? Those 3 components, when you are a great leader, it moves you in the right direction. So I know I've gone very quickly through what the 7 core principles are of leadership mastery, but I wanted to make sure that you guys got a taste for what this is, and hopefully I provided some great value for you so that you can go back and start applying some of this on your own. What I'm going to be doing next is I'm going to be putting together this video. I'll kind of move me out of the main spotlight, and you'll have some slides that go with it. So if you want to go back through this or you want to share it with someone else, you'll be able to. I've got your email addresses, and I'll do a follow-up email by the 1st of next week with this webinar on it, with the slides built into it, so that you can review it, and please share it with other people. I am putting on a full day on this, going as a deep dive in each of the 7 core principles, and that is in partnership with Leadership Amarillo and Canyon. We have worked this is my 5th year with LAC, and up to this point, we did a Leadership 2.0. So each year we did 7 one-hour sessions, and we did them over lunch. And one of the pieces of feedback that we keep getting is, can you just do it in one day? We're getting busier and busier. Taking 7 lunches is really tough. So we organized this, revamped some of the course based on some more current research, and came up with this full day of leadership mastery. I would love to have you at this, and I would love for you to invite others to come to this. It's going to be on April the 8th. It's $249, and it does go to support a great cause. We support the youth who are in Leadership Amarillo and Canyon, and it's one of the very few fundraisers we do each year. We just did our Leadership Summit, and it was a wild success. And now we're doing Leadership Mastery on April the 8th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. in downtown Amarillo at Amarillo College. And we have space for 200 people. We're right now about 10% full on that, but we would love to have you and your organization as a part of it. I'm going to unmute people. And if you have any questions, we have about 15 minutes left. And I just unmuted everybody. So if you're eating Cheetos in the background, we can now hear you. All right. If no questions, I want to thank you guys for being a part of this. This was our first one to do in this fashion, kind of leading up to another event. My goal is in anything that I do to provide as much value as I can. If you need any help with anything after this, my email is jody@jodyholland.com, and I'm going to put this in here for everybody. So feel free to reach out with any questions that you have. Feel free to share this webinar with anybody that you would like to. I love having you on here. I thought we had a great turnout. We had 33 people sign up and 27 show up, which according to everything I've read is so much better than normal. So thank you guys very much for being a part of this. I look forward to you being on the next one. I've got some great resources on YouTube. I have a podcast called Psyche of Success. So please follow me on all the different socials. Just look for The Jody Holland. So thank you guys very much. And I'll see you on the next webinar.